If you saw my last video, you'll realize I haven't made much progress with the move. It's very much in the shambles it was before. In the last video, I talked about my time in hospital when I was forced to be lying more or less immobile on my bed, completely helpless, and finding it difficult to sleep during the night. So I was thinking of a lot of things. And I talked last time about, I mentioned my concerns with there was I in a comfortable hospital bed being looked after by everyone while terrible things were happening in the rest of the world. And I particularly focused on what was going on in Ukraine just before I went to hospital. The thought of, the bombings, the destruction, the shooting, and here was I in the luxury of a hospital. Now, I spent an awful long time in that bed. I thought of a lot of other things. And this was one of the other things I thought about during all that time. Let's focus on my anger. I could lie there being very angry about what is happening in Ukraine. And the one part of my nature is I'm an Aries, an angry Aries warrior. And so what I would love to be able to do would be to send 1 million drones into Moscow to completely fog up their defensive systems, and then send 10 hypersonic missiles onto the Kremlin and blow the whole thing up. I'm sure that would do a lot of good. The only snag there of this wonderful plan is that I don't have 1 million drones and I don't have any hypersonic missiles. So it's all a bit sort of fantasy, isn't it? A little bit, yeah, just fantasy. So what actually could I do for my hospital bed? You might say nothing, but about a month before, someone had told me about a Buddhist meditation, and it went something like this. You feel love in your heart. You hold it there and then you let it expand to all of you, full of love. Then you let it expand to family and friends, full of love. Then you let it expand further to your whole country, full of love. Then you let it expand to the whole world, full of love. And you hold that for as long as you can. Well, my angry Aries is saying, that's not the sort of leading edge chaos magic thinking people want from you. That's more like woo woo new age nonsense. Well, yes, but let's look at it in more detail. You hold a feeling of love in your heart. Now, I've done enough sort of new age stuff to know that that's what they call heart energy, good heart energy. So, how do you get that feeling? Well, quite a lot of people will know that feeling. They've experienced it, and I had. In particular, when I used to contemplate my beautiful, furry Siberian forest cat, particularly the tabby one, because tabby cats have got that sort of worried frown on their face. They sit there looking as though they've got the cares of the world on their shoulders, but they're just looking so beautifully furry and lovable. And I used to really feel it in my heart, a glow of love for that cat. And then I practiced sort of holding that, stay in that position, stay in that feeling, hold it there. Now, okay, that sounds a bit like a woo-woo new age meditation, but the point is it's actually physically good for you to do that. that that feeling, I don't know the terminology, it's sort of releasing endorphins or something, which is actually healthy for the body. It relaxes, lowers blood pressure, does all sorts of nice things to the body. So this exercise is well worth doing, if only for that. Even if you're the most selfish person in the world, to hold a feeling of love in your heart is a good thing to do. Well, if you haven't got a Siberian forest cat, how do you do it? Well, the obvious thing that occurred to me as I lay on my hospital bed is to think of my beloved spouse, unconditional love. And I just realized there's a bit of a snag because humans are very complicated. It isn't quite so easy to turn on unconditional love for a human without thoughts like, um, yeah, I love her, but I mean, what about the bitchy things about me cleaning the kitchen? She said in the morning. You know, little sort of interruptions come in. And interesting thing is, I tried this out on a good friend of ours, a mutual friend. I was explaining that and how I got the unconditional love by thinking of my cat. And this friend laughed and said, I know what you mean. I do it by thinking of a flower. Now, that was very reassuring, you see, because I realized that for anyone, uh, instead of trying to feel unconditional love for some person and then sort of feeling guilty because you can't quite get it unconditional, start by thinking of something you just simply love, whether it's a cat or a dog or even a motorbike. If you just get that feeling of adoration, hold it because it's a very good feeling and it's a healthy meditation. And if you can then, with that feeling, spread it out, do you feel that love for all yourself? You could fill your full, almost like an egg full of this love. That's also very healthy. Even if you're the most selfish person in the world, you're doing yourself good. Well worth it. Okay, now the next step is you then extend it out to your country, your family, out into the whole world. That's all very nice, but it didn't actually make the war stop when I was lying there on my bed. So, is it really a bit of a waste of time? Is it a pretty ineffectual thing to do? Well, it is for only one person. But what if uh, 1 billion people were doing it around the world, or even everyone doing it? That would make a hell of a difference because beholding that state is very different from feeling anger and rage and going to war. So it's sort of, it's like a teaspoonful of value in a very troubled world. But it did more to me because you see, I was thinking, is it possible for me to feel unconditional love, say, to the Russian soldiers causing all this destruction? Now, to do myself credit, when the war broke out, the media were very quick to start talking about the Russians against the Ukrainians. And I didn't do that because I knew that that was unfair because there were many Russians who weren't actually damaging Ukraine. And I say I know that. It's logical. You see, Ukraine and Russia were, for a while, they were all part of one country. So there are plenty of people who are Russian, but they visited Ukraine, they have holidays there. Um, and uh, are really mixed up with them. They have friends. There are Ukrainian people living in Russia who are their neighbors, and so on and so forth. So the idea that there's this complete split, Russia, Ukraine, is actually false. It's much more complicated than that. And yet the propaganda was beginning to create that split. So I found that I could feel unconditional love for those Russians who have been subjected to this propaganda and are trying to resist it, who are trying to tell themselves this isn't true. But what about the ones that were believing it? The ones who were hating the Ukrainians, who thought they were Nazis trying to destroy Russia? Now, to get a feeling for that, I had to sort of translate it into my experience. I was brought up in Gloucestershire, which is part of England close to the Welsh border. And so, just like the situation I'm describing, there were plenty of Welsh people living around me, and I visited Wales. I had friends in Wales, that sort of thing. But what if I began to believe that all Welsh people were Nazis that were trying to destroy England? Now, it's almost impossible for me to believe that. But what if I did? If something went wrong with my brain, and so there was I absolutely convinced that these Welsh people here. Once I saw Welsh people, I thought, oh, it's them. How might I behave? And if I did have that delusion, I might behave just as badly as the Russians are against the Ukrainians. I might I might join a militia. I might go out trying to sabotage. I might try to ban Welsh people from being in my village and things like that. Um, you see, people suffer from delusions. And to what extent can you really believe them? If they really believe that, if they behave badly? So then I take it to the limit. What about Putin? Oh, I feel so angry with him and what he's doing to Russia. But it seems as though Putin really believes that God has appointed him to save Russia. Fate, God, the universe, has given him this important role. Now, of course, that's exactly what Hitler thought when he ruined Germany. He thought he was a sort of divine savior saving Germany, and it blinded him and made him do crazy things to destroy Germany. And I think that's what Putin's doing. So I can't say that I really managed the unconditional love for Putin, but I began to think of him rather differently as this sad little guy, deluded guy, doing terrible things. So, what do I think of this exercise? Well, it did me good. People kept saying, the nurses and that, how very quickly I was recovering from my operation. So, all this sort of filling myself with love energy was healthy for me, and I think would be healthy for anyone who did it. It hasn't changed the world, but it's worth remembering that if enough people did it, it might begin to have a real change. And then even just the things it made me think about, the anger I felt to certain people and certain types of people, it sort of worked on that anger, softened it a bit. And maybe if I keep on and on doing this, I will achieve a feeling of universal love for the whole world. And that'd be worth going for, wouldn't it?